Lamed Aleph, Amud Beis, and we are 5 lines before the wide lines start. In the middle of that short area, it says B'ma'amados in parentheses. So we were talking about what is said on various days and the reason that is said. And to refresh, the Ma'amados are the people who represent the Jewish people with respect to certain karbanos, and though there were some in Jerusalem and others would stay in their town, and there were certain things they would say. The discussion here is going to be, what do they say? Ba'amados, b'maisa bereshis. What do they talk about? Maisa bereshis. Menahane mile. From where do we know that this is what they're going to talk about? Amar Reb Ami. Reb Ami said, Il male ma'amados. If it were not for these ma'amados and their prayers, lo niskayomo shemayim va'aretz, then the whole world, the whole heaven and earth would not exist. Shene amar, im lo brisi yomam v'layla hukos shemayim va'aretz. We're going back here. This bris is talking now about the bris bein basarim. If not for my covenant, then I would not have established the laws, or I would not have established heaven and earth. Lo samti, I would have not have created. B'ksiv ve'yaimer. Hashem Elokim, this is now Avram talking to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Vayomer, Hashem Elokim, b'ma eda ki irshena. How do I know that I am going to inherit this? How do I know that, in other words, that you're going to keep your promise? Amar Avraham lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is what Avraham said to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He said, Rabbanu Shalom, Shema chas v'sholem Yisrael chatim lefaneka. Perhaps the Jewish people in the future will sin in front of you. Va'ata oseh lehem kedor hamavol ukedor haflaga. And perhaps you will do to them what you did to the Dor HaMabul and the Dor HaFlaga. Amar lo, and HaKadosh Baruch said to him, Lav, no. Amar lifnei lefanav Rabbanu Shalom. Can you imagine he's now having an argument with HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Amar lefanav Rabbanu Shalom. B'ma eda, how do I know this? Amar lo, and he said to him, Kuchuli egla mishuleshes. Egla mishuleshes. We're now again talking about the bris bein of basarim. We're going there. Amar lefanav Rabbanu Shalom. Tinak bisman shebeis hamikdash kayam. Well, that's fine at the time that the beis hamikdash exists. Bisman she'ein beis hamikdash kayam. Ma tehei alehem. Then what will it be when they can't bring sacrifices? Amar lo kavar tikanti lehem seder karbanos. I already established, back at the time of the bris habasarim, which is in Lech Lecha. Kol zaman shekorin bahen, and I established karbanos for kol zaman shekorin bahen, and any time that the Jewish people read them, like we do, Maila ani alehem, I will consider it keilu makrivim lifnei karban umoikal ani al kal avonosehem. So it was already established in the promise to Avraham Avinu that when there was be no Beis Hamikdash, that our saying karbanos would be the equivalent of it. Rabbeinu Yonah, who lived around the year, I think, 1200, said this is the basis for the obligation for us to say karbanos every day. And one other point I wanted to make, I remember reading some years ago a commentary about the Bris HaBasarim by Yosef Albo. He wrote a famous book called Sefer HaIkarim. And he said, what's the inyan of the Bris HaBasarim? You take an animal and you cut it in half, and two people walk in between the two halves. It's creating an equivalency and a connection between them. And since Avraham walked through the halves of the animals with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it was creating this permanent connection between them. Good morning. Okay, moving on. The Tainus. When it comes to Tainus, what do we say? And as I said, we said yesterday, we're going to say B'Tainus brachos for klalos, ve'ein mafsikim the klalos. When it comes to brachos and klalos, and we had a discussion, we don't interrupt in the middle of something. As we said yesterday, we don't read this anymore. We read via call, but let's go on. Mahani Mile, from where do we know this, that we don't interrupt? Amar Rav Kiya bar Gamda, Amar Rabbi Asi, da Amar Kra, Moiser Hashem, B'nei Al Timas. When a Kodesh Baruch Hu gives to B'nai Yisrael, to my children, Musar Timas, they should not disdain it. They should not find it disgusting. They should pay attention to it. Reish Lakish Amar, Lefi she'ein omrim bracha oramios. Why do we set up reading the bracha that way? Because we don't make a bracha in the midst or just before the beginning of a punishment. Ella, hello? Tzvi, your son is not here today. He took his class to New York, so I'm sitting in. Haki Avid, how is it that we do it? Tana Kishahu Matkil B'pasuk Shalifneha Ukashaya Messiah B'pasuk Shala Akareha. If we're not going to stop in the begin or end in the middle of a klal, what do? We start at least one pasuk before the klalos begin, and we end at least one pasuk after they end. Amar Abaya, La Shanu Ela B'klalos Shabatoras Kahanim. We do not say this except about the klalos that are found in Vayikra, of a klalos Shabamishnah Torah posek. But the klalos that we find in Devarim, we do. And we're going to go on to explain the difference between those klalos, and briefly what it is. The klalos in Vayikra are considered to be more severe than the klalos in Devarim, and we're going to explain in a minute the reason why is that the klalos in Vayikra are said in the plural form, implying that it applies to every person. The ones in Devarim are said in singular form. And when you say it in singular form, it could apply to you and you, but not to, it can apply to A and B, but not necessarily to C and D. And that's what we're going to be saying here. My time, and what is the reason for this distinction? Hallelujah. The Lashon Rabim Omarit, because they are said in the plural, as I just said. We have the same concept of plural versus singular other places in halakha. For example, when it comes to counting sphira, we say Utvarta Lachem, which is in plural, which means every single person is included and has to count sphira. But when it comes to good morning, when it comes to something like aval, Shemitah and aval, I'll just stick with aval. It said lahem. They should. It's in singular, and so it's done by the Beis Din, not by individuals. Where were we? B'lashon Rabim Amoris u'Moshe mipi hagavora amhu v'halalu b'lashon Yakid. But Moshe said on his own, although with instructions from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he said it in Yakid. Therefore, it's deemed to be not as severe as the klalos that are in Vayikra. Amor, so Moshe mipi atzmo, and Moshe said it himself. Amru Levi Barbuti Avakare Vaka Megamgame. There was somebody named Levi Barbute who said these klalos, and he said it Megamgame. Megamgame means sort of he was stuttering or not. It's the way I talk. He was stuttering or not talking clearly. Kameya de Rav Huna, he said this in front of Rav Huma Ba'arure. He said these klalos in front of Rav Huna. Amarlo, I think I'm saying that correctly. So go ahead, say it the way that you want. Lo shanu, why? And he said, Lo shanu ela klalos shabatora kohanim, although Mishnah Torah posek. Okay, he was apparently saying the curses that are found in Devarim rather than in Vayikra, and so Rav Huna said, "Go ahead, say it any way you want." Tanya, Reb Shimon ben Elazar, Omer, Ezra Tikin lehem liyisrael shiyu korin klalus shabatoris kohanim koidem atzeres. So Ezra who puts many of our prayers the way they are and many of our customs about the Torah the way that they are, said that we should say these curses from Vayikra before Atzeres, before Shavuos. Who should the Mishnah Torah and what's in Devarim, Koidem Rosh Hashanah. My timer, what is the reason that he fixed this? Amar Abaya, the Itema Reish Lakish, that was Abaya's comment. The Itema Reish Lakish, but Reish Lakish said, today Shatikla Hashanim V'Kololoseh. He said so that we should end the year and get all the curses out of the way so that we start a new year clean. We can have a year just of brachos. Bishlomo, this works fine. Shabbat Mishnah Torah. This works fine when we know that Devarim we end around Rosh Hashanah time. Ika Kadei Shatikla. Oh, to the Torah's Kohanim, but it will come to Sefer Vayikra Atu Atzer. I don't think I can do it. I'll see if there's a way to do it.
There is. Oh, you're not the admin.
I'm not sure that I'm the host.
All right, guys. Everybody, please mute yourselves.
Okay. So where we are is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We're 9 lines up from the bottom on Lamed Aleph, the second side of the Daf. Atu Atzeres Rosh Hashanah he. Is it the case that Atu Atzeres Rosh Hashanah? Is it the case that Atzeres, that Shavuos is a Rosh Hashanah? He says yes, it is so. Atzeres Nami Rosh Hashanah he. Why do we say this to Tanan? Because we have a Mishnah, Atzeres al Perus Ha'ilan. Because you may recall from Rosh Hashanah, we had all these different Rosh Hashanahs that are described in, I think, the first Mishnah of Rosh Hashanah. And one of them is the Rosh Hashanah of Ilanus, of fruit trees, and that was on Shavuos. Tanya, I think we're done with that. Yes, we're done with that. We're on to something else entirely. Tanya, we have a brisa. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer, Im Yarmar lecha zechenim, Sator v'yoladim bana soiter. If you talk to older people and they say that you should destroy something, tear it down, and you talk to younger people and they say no, build, you should listen to the older people and tear it down. Ba'al tivna mipnei shestirim zakenim binyan. Because if older people with wisdom say you should tear or destroy something, it's for the purpose of ultimately building up. Ubinyan arim starim. And when young people say to build something up, it often results in just tearing down. The Simon, the Devar Rechavim ben Shlomo. And we know this from the story of Rechavim ben Shlomo. Rechavim was the son of Shlomo, and he was a real nasty fellow. And you may recall yesterday I sent out something on WhatsApp. I'm going to hold it up to the camera in case anybody didn't get it. I sent out something on WhatsApp. I sent out this photo. It's a photo of a painting. See it?
Yeah.
It's a photo of a painting that I remembered seeing years ago, and I was struck by it. It's actually a painting that was done in the early, I think, 1500s in Europe, and it's a painting of the son of Shlomo. And it struck me because whoever did this painting caught the look of an arrogant and stupid man with a crown on his head, and he's holding out one finger in the painting. He's holding out a finger like this. Because in Sefer Malachim is the story of him. Apparently Shlomo enacted incredibly onerous taxes on the people. Right. But at least they got buildings to show for it. And when he was Shlomo was succeeded by this fellow. They came to him and said, we can't take it anymore. Will you lower our taxes? And it says he talked to the elders and said, should I lower the taxes? And they said, yes, if you do, you'll have the people's loyalty forever.
Right, his friends.
And he talked to his friends and they said, don't even think about it. And they said, either they said or he said, tell them that your pinky is worth more than your father's loins. And I think that's a way of saying that his pinky meant more than his father's whole manhood. Can you imagine saying that about Shlomo HaMelech? So in this painting, he's holding out his finger like that. Don't ask me what this little passage has to do with the Gemara that we're learning. I have no idea, but it's interesting. Huh?
Hey, Naftali,
10. Yes.
it's Rennie. When they used to swear, they always put their hand by the loins. And then you have kids saying, let's do a pinky swear. So maybe it also meant, like your word or your oath is worth more than your father's. Just an alternative explanation.
That's interesting. That's interesting. I think you're looking Lakoff's goose at this bad fellow. But that's interesting. Thank you. Okay, we're now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines from the bottom. Tana Rabbanan. We have a brisa. Makom shemafsikim b'Shabbos shachris, sham korim b'minka. B'minka sham korim b'sheni on Monday, b'sheni sham korim b'chamishi sham korim l'Shabbos haba. Divrei Rabbi Meir. What Rabbi Meir here is saying, and we touched on this briefly yesterday, is that where we end up reading, where we finish reading on Shabbos morning, we start there on Shabbos afternoon. Let's say we read the next 10 Pesuchim, and then on Monday, we read the next 10 Pesuchim, and on Thursday, we read the next 10. And then next Shabbos, we subtract the first 30 because we've already read them and start there. These are the words of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Makom shemafsikim b'Shabbos. He says the place where we stop on Shabbos, Chakras, Sham, there, Korim b'Minka, Ushnei b'Chamishi, U'Shabbos haba, and on Shabbos haba. So he's saying, do like we do now, where we start at the beginning of the new parsha. Rabbi Zera comes and says, Alaka mokom shemafsikim b'Shabbos, Shakri Sham, Korim b'Minka, U'B'Sheni, U'B'Chamishi. The place where we finish, that's where we're going to read Shabbos afternoon and on Monday and on Thursday. Ula Shabbos haba. V'lema, and so now we are going to say, Halakha Karabi Yehuda, Mishum Da'afki Lahu. This is a little confusing. Why are they coming now and saying the halakha is like Rabbi Yehuda? Why don't we just say it's like Rabbi Yehuda? And this phrase that's at the top of my Gemara on page Lamed Beis is Lashum La'afki Lahu. We're going to have it again. It means because people had some confusion about who was saying what and where the halakha really ended up. So they're coming to put a exclamation point. This is the halakha. It's not like Rabbi Yehuda. It's not like Rabbi Meir. It's like Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, now we're getting into an interesting topic, which touches on halakha l'maisa. Tana Rabbanim, Poseik v'roa, when somebody is called up for an aliyah. Okay, Poseik, he unrolls the scroll, v'roa, and looks at it. What is he looking at? He's looking at the spot where he is going to read or it's going to be read on his behalf. Golel, then he rolls it closed again. Umavarak, and he makes the bracha, and it's the bracha that we make. V'chayzer uposeik v'kareh. Then he opens it up again and he reads Divrei Rabbi Meir. These are the words of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, he has a different point of view. Poseik v'roa umavarak. He opens it up, he looks where he's going to read, he makes the bracha immediately, v'koreh, and he reads. My timer, what is the difference, reason for the difference of opinions that they have? The Rabbi Meir, K'da Ula, he says, like Ula says, the Amar Ula, Mipnei ma, Mipna Amru, Hakori B'Torah, Lo Yisiya L'Maturgaman. He says that the person who, there's a concern that he has that people are going to form misimpressions about what is being read from the Sefer Torah itself, okay? And his concern here, he says, is that whoever is reading the Torah does not help the translator. Remember, we talked about the custom that he would read one pasuk, and the Maturgim would translate one pasuk into Aramaic. He says the person reading the Torah does not help the Maturgim. Why? Kadei shelo ya'amru Torgan kasu b'Torah, so that no one would think that the Aramaic is written in the Torah itself. Hakanami, Kadei shelo, also we said, shelo yomru bruchas kasuva b'Torah. And also, we don't want anyone to think that the brachas that someone makes before and after are actually written in the Torah. So that's these are reasons that it's closed up. And of course, that is what we do. Rabbi Yehuda, Targum, Iko Lemeuta, and Rabbi Yehuda is coming along, and he's really questioning this whole line of thinking. Yosef, we're at the top of Lamed Beis. We are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 lines down. And he's saying this would be an error. Why would somebody ever think that you are reading the brachas from inside the Torah? You could understand maybe in wanting to help the Maturgim, but the brachas, come on, everybody can remember these two brachas that we say before and after. Birkos Leka, so we don't say Lema'ute. We're not really concerned about people making an error. Amar Ravi Zera, Amar Rav Masna, Halakha Poseg, Baroa, Mavarek. The halakha is that we open it, we look, we Mavarek, Bakore. Belema, and again, we have the same phraseology, but let's say now that definitively, halakha ka Rabbi Yehuda. The halakha is like Rabbi Yehuda, which is what we do now. We open it up, we look at where we're supposed to read, and we close it up, make the bracha, and then open it again. Okay. Halakha ka Rabbi Yehuda. Mishum da'afki lahu. Amar Rav Zera. We're on to a new subject now. Amar Rav Zera. Rav Masna. Amar Rav Zera. Amar Rav Nasna. Halukus habima. Ein behen mishum kedusha. The lukos and the bima. If we look at the Rashi on this subject, this Rashi is the first Rashi of the narrow lines of Rashi up on the right. And it says bima. No, let's go to the Rashi before there. The last of the wide lines. He comes to explain halukos. He says halukos lo yadati mahain. I don't know what he's referring to. He says yesh omri. There's somebody here. There's some who have an opinion that his board's having something to do with Sephorim, but he really doesn't know what it's referring to. And let's look at the next Rashi, bima. The bima does not mean what we call the bima. What is the bima? It says this is what was made for the king in Shanas Hakel once every 7 years when he would go stand up and read certain passages. So it's not clear what we're really talking about. But at any rate, they do not acquire Kedusha. Amar Rav Shaftiyah, Amar Rab Yochanan, Hagolo Sefer Torah, Sarik Shia Amidu al HaKoifer. It's important that you roll it so that the seam is in the middle. And Moshe Drew, and I hope you're going to interject as appropriate. And the reason that's given elsewhere for why we do that is so that if someone is tightening it, excuse me?
Say again.
The reason we do that is if someone is tightening it and there is going to be a rip, that the rip should be on the seam and not on the paper itself.
Right.
Unfortunately, I experienced this directly myself. I take care of the Sefer Torah in my shul, and Tishrei is when we get done with everything, and Tishrei is when I get them all, folded up tight and squared away for the year, and we have a little Sefer that the rabbi wanted. Somebody showed up and she said she had a business where she got paid in cash partly, and over the years she'd acquired $50,000 in cash. And she wanted to donate it. And she really wanted a Sefer Torah. And so we ended up with this little Sefer Torah because the rabbi had always wanted one like the one the Rebbe had. And I was tightening up just like all of the others, and I tightened it too tight. And I heard a
It
rip.
wasn't your fault.
It
wasn't
was
your-
my fault. It was
not
completely my
your
fault.
Don't say that on, no, my client doesn't know what he's talking about.
And fortunately, it pulled out a string and pulled off the tape. So, we were able to fix it easily, but
PH.
I have this experience in my life. Hagolo Sefer Tarik Midu ala Toifer, Amar Reb Shaftia, Amar Rav Yochanan, Hagolo Sefer Torah Golola mi b'chutz. He says you roll it from the outside, the ein gololu mi bifnim, and you don't roll it from the inside. What does this mean? It took me a while to figure out what this meant. We're not talking about the sefer like we have, where we put it down and we roll with the wood, the Eitz Chaim. We're talking about the old type of seforim, and I saw them when I was in Israel, where it was not necessarily an Eitz Chaim. So imagine you're sitting with the sefer and you want to roll it up, and instead of putting it this way, you turn it around and it's sitting horizontally on your lap. Now you have, part of it is in front of you and part of it is behind. If you roll it this way, which would be the natural thing to do, there's a concern that what's on the other end is going to fall off and hit the ground. So how do we roll it then? You roll it coming towards you.
Got it.
Okay, that
Got it.
way, if there's anything loose,
Yeah. Gotta
It's-
go.
it's against you. Now, but then we're going to say, how do you then tighten it? You now have this piece here. How do you tighten it? You tighten it from the piece that's against your belly. Why do we do that? Because it's not considered kavadik to the sefer if it falls open at all, that you're reaching over the sefer. So, in other words, you have to be careful with what you do. Okay,
This isn't if you have someone else that's helping.
what's that?
That's not if you have someone else that's helping you.
Not if you have someone else helping you, but it seems to me the way we do it, which is very unusual.
Yeah.
Is a safe way, but most people don't know what to,
Doesn't
aren't from
seem,
Chabad, don't
I
know
would
what
be
to do.
very
You can give
cautious
them an aliyah.
Doing it like that.
Okay. There is, by the way, a Tosfos over here. Arts on the top left, Gololu, and Mibakutz, et cetera, et cetera. And what he really ends up saying in this Tosfos at the end, about, 6, 7 lines up from the bottom of the Tosfos, he says, "U'lechatchila." He says this whole discussion about how you're going to roll it, we're going to finish up in a moment, is really just a discussion about lechatchila and b'diavad. And what you end up doing is okay. And he was referring, by the way, back there to whether you open and open and close before it's read. That's an interesting Tosfos if anybody wants to go back to it. Yes, sir.
I'm just thinking of when I have to occasionally roll up a poster, or actually Megillah Esther and stick it into a cardboard. Initially, like it just like a
Whoa, how'd that go?
sticky, it comes back, but it comes back larger diameter than the cardboard roll. So
Slipping
when
back to that also.
tighten it, I always put my fingers inside and turn the inside one to get it tighter, because you can't really tighten the outside one to get it smaller. It only gets smaller by, winding the inside. It's almost like a clock necklace.
Yeah.
Whatever.
That would work off the
Whatever.
physics, but Rennie, there's a slight halakhic problem with that. You should we're really not supposed to touch the Sefer Torah. Okay, so
Well, I'm thinking of
Yom Kippur
Megillah.
is so far away.
same, well, a Megillah might be different because a Megillah is the one item we have in our life that's sort of in between a normal Sefer and a Sefer Torah as far as halakhas go. So it's probably all right, but don't apply it to a Sefer Torah.
I won't. Anyway, ours
We're
had
really
8
not
signs,
supposed to touch
8
the
signs,
Sefer
8
Torah.
signs.
It's
Thank you for your story, Dr.
Okay. Because for engolaling bifnim, ukashuhu mahadek, and when you tighten it, I covered this already. Mahadek mahadek mahadku mibifnim. There you do it the other way. The mahadku mibakutz.
It says here that the margins don't have any sanctity.
Don't have the margins to what? Put your hands on. Moshe, that's right. What I was commenting, that a Megillah is sort of halfway in between a normal Sefer, which doesn't have Kedusha, and a Sefer Torah, isn't it? Moshe's not there anymore. Okay,
Yes, I'll answer yes.
okay. Let's go
Here,
on.
I'm just muted. What's your question? Sorry, I'm still here. What do
The
you ask?
question was, the subject came up about the Kedusha, the status of the Kedusha on a Megillah versus the Kedusha of a Sefer Torah.
Well, it's definitely less than the Torah. It doesn't have Hashem's name.
Yeah, it's less.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's what I say too, Moshe.
it's an interesting study.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Okay, let's go on. The Amarav Shaftia. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Amarav Yochanan, Asera Shakara B'Torah. 10 people who read in a Torah, Hagodol Shebahem Golel, Sefer Torah. The greatest of them is the one who's chosen for Galila. Today, people tend to think that is what you give to people who you don't want to give as much covet as someone who gets an aliyah. But here, the opinion here is this is the greatest covet.
Oh, wow.
Why? Because you're holding the whole Torah.
I thought Galila has exclusive all the Aliyahs that came before.
Your excellent question. We're about to read that. But
We learned
why?
about this before.
Because he's got the whole Torah. Everyone else just has a connection to one, what is written there, aliyah, but he's gotten a connection to the whole Torah. Okay.
What, for Hagba or
Excuse me.
you're referring to Hagba? Or
We're talking about Galila here, but it's a good question, and I looked this up last night, and it said it's probably referring to Hagba and Galila.
oh, okay.
Okay.
Wow.
So by Chabad, the Hagba does the Galila. By non-Chabad, by Mitzvah, Galila
Oh.
is separate.
Lila is when you open the
Aaron
Aron Kodesh, no? Or is
No,
that?
Hagba is lifting.
Yeah,
up.
Hagba, yeah. but
Galila
Lila
is
is-
turning.
Galila, it means turning.
Sifa
We call
is
that
open.
the Sifa
Oh, it's true,
opening.
Hagba doesn't do the
It's
Lila.
different terms.
Hagba doesn't do Lila.
I was in a young Israel shul last year
Yeah, it's true.
on Shabbos, and the Gabbai came up to me and said, "We want to give you an honor. What do you want?" And I said, "Well,
Everything. Trick question.
I'll take Galila, because I figured that would be the easiest." And I got done, and the president of shul came over and said to me in a very, and I sat down. I went and sat down. Came over and said to me in a very stern voice, "Don't you know you're supposed to go shake the rabbi's hand?" I looked at him and thought, no, I didn't know I was supposed to do that. So I got up and I went to the rabbi.
So
I
friendly.
said to him, they told me I was supposed to come shake your hand. And so he said, okay. And he shook my hand. And then I learned that they had an incident in that shul where someone didn't like the rabbi and refused to shake the rabbi hands. So they wrote a letter to Moshe Feinstein. That's what they should do about the Posei Kador. And he said, well, if that's the rule in your shul, then don't give someone a leave if they won't shake the rabbi's hand. So
Beautiful.
it's just
It is
just a
com-
funny
It is
incident.
a common.
Oh, yes, sir.
thing
It is.
in other shuls that they go up to the Biva afterwards and shake the rabbi in presence, whether they will make the rounds back,
But how are you supposed to know that?
Yeah.
show up twice.
Okay. Let's go back. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Asara Shakaru B'Torah, Agolo Sefer Torah, People Sakar Kulan, and he receives the honor of all of them. And before she come here and say, what does it mean? You really mean they don't receive any honor? They don't receive any scar for their aliyahs? Scar Kulan, Salkadaitka, is this what you're really saying? Ella Ema, People Scar Keneged Kulan, he receives the equivalent of the scar that all of them have.
You know, enough telling my accent sound.
I make your accent sound good?
I agree.
We're talking.
Yeah.
Scar, that's scar. Scars is what we take care of in our medical profession. Scar.
Scar. Okay. I don't know who is going to be doing this Siyum
You are.
tomorrow.
You are.
You deserve it.
We just
You're the best.
selected you.
You're the best.
Rabbi Smith retired. You got this job permanent.
Oh, you're doing it. That's what
You're
Rabbi
the
Smith's on.
man.
It's on the website.
You're the
It's
gone.
on the website already.
No, it's not.
Hey, put it up this thing.
Just putting it on right now, so. right now.
Okay, so you know what? We're gonna stop here so we have something to say in the CM tomorrow.
Awesome.
Because if I go to the natural end here, we start on the beginning, the wide lines, and we'll be through that in about a minute and a
No
half.
one's gonna be upset with early dismissal.
Okay, so we're gonna stop here.
We're
And we'll-
stopping at.
We'll stop right there, and we'll pick it up and do the rest in the CM tomorrow morning.